What we're looking at here are polygenic traits and how the environment sometimes plays a role on gene expression. Polygenic traits are traits that are controlled by more than one gene. And the environment sometimes impacts especially these kinds of traits. So let's take a look at several examples. One example of a polygenic trait would be eye color. Notice how the eye color is determined by more than one gene. Big A, big B, little b. So there's more than one gene that's controlling eye color. Notice that the more dominant alleles, the darker the eye color. The more recessive alleles, the lighter the eye color. Also notice that in between, there's all kinds of intermediates. There's greens, there's browns, there's greenish browns and grays. So polygenic traits, because they're controlled by more than one gene, there's a lot of variety in expression. In this way, the environment can play a role. So sometimes the environment can affect the expression of those genes so that they might or might not be expressed to their full potential. Here's another example, height. Polygenic. So we've got big A, big B, big C, little c. And if you have two individuals who are completely heterozygous for that trait, for height, they can have children that are a wide range of heights. There is a possibility that there's a combination of alleles that they have a very, very tall child. There's also the possibility that there's a very, very short child. But the highest probabilities are going to be somewhere in the middle of that bell-shaped curve. So we can kind of look at this as this wide spectrum of heights, but understand that height can also be influenced by nutrition. If you don't get a square meal, those genes are never going to realize their full potential. Here's another example that compares monogenic and polygenic traits. So monogenic just means that it's controlled by one gene. Polygenic means it's controlled by many genes. With monogenic traits, either you have it or you don't have it. So there's two separate categories. There's the categories of have and have not. But polygenic means there's going to be some intermediates in between, a spectrum of variation. Think like hair color. There's all kinds of variations with hair color, or skin color. There's all kinds of variation with skin color. And again, the environment can play a role with skin color. How much are you in the sun? Because that's going to impact skin color. Well, what you eat, that'll impact your skin tone to some degree. Whether or not you have injuries or burns, that might affect your skin tone in those areas. So there's all kinds of variation in skin color, plus the environment can play a role in how those genes get expressed. Monogenic traits follow Mendel's ratios. So 9 to 3 to 3 to 1, or 3 to 1, or 1 to 1. You're going to have these distinct ratios, very specific probabilities. But polygenic traits, you don't have those ratios. Now, given enough data, it'll fall into this bell-shaped curve. But what if it's not two heterozygous individuals? What if it's an individual that's homozygous recessive and a heterozygous individual? You're going to get some variety of outcomes along that spectrum, and there's no great probabilities for that. So the ratios are going to be all odd and bizarre. But generally, the two heterozygous individuals are going to get a bell-shaped curve. So here's another example that just kind of compares those things. If we have a widow's peak, for example, that's going to be monogenic. You either have it or you don't have it. So you're either going to fall into the one category or the other. They're going to follow Mendel's ratios very predictably. But skin pigmentation, it's polygenic. You're going to have this spectrum of skin pigmentation. Most are going to fall in the middle of that, but some are going to be on the one side, very dark. Some are going to be on the other side, very light, maybe even albino. But most are going to be somewhere in between. So the environment does play a role. It can impact phenotype. Once again, height and nutrition. So if you never get a square meal, or like muscular, you might be you might have all the genetic potential to be very strong, but if you never work out and exercise, that genetic potential will never be realized. Occasionally, the environment does impact genotype. Not in the case of humans so much, but in the case of other things like turtles, for example, the temperature at the time of the egg laying and the development could change that genotype, the actual genetics, as a turtle will become male or maybe female, depending on the temperature of the embryonic development. So those factors can play a role where the environment actually influences genotype in some instances with living things. So hopefully that describes a little bit better for you in a way you can understand polygenic traits controlled by more than one gene, and how the environment sometimes plays a role in genetics.